In this segment, we're going to take a look at the planting trees, the Ellen White method. Ellen White spent 9 years of her life in Australia from the years 1891 to 1900, helping to develop the Seventh Adventist Church in the South Pacific region, and in particular the establishment of Avondale School for the Christian Workers, later named Avondale College. During these years in Australia, she wrote The Desire of Ages. According to Milton Raymond Hooke, who was working on a doctoral thesis at Andrews University in 1978, Avondale School was established in 1894, but the search was a lengthy process. One of the potential properties was Lakeland Estates, which had deep chocolate-colored soil, but it proved to be too expensive. The Brettville Estates soil was sampled and considered poor and sour. Ellen White commented in a letter to her husband, "When we were investigating the land at Corranbong, our brethren held off from purchasing for a whole year, thinking to find some other local locality land which would compare well with the rich soil of Iowa. This they finally decided could not be found, but the work was hindered for a whole year because some of the brethren had not the faith to move forward in spite of the discouraging circumstances." She continues, "In the night season, a representation had been given me that revealed this lack of faith. I seemed to be on the Avondale land, and while the horses were breaking away through the forest, I walked in an open space close to where our school buildings now stand. I saw a furrow made in the soil 1 foot deep and about 4 in length. Two of the brethren stood at the furrow, one at each end. They were examining the soil and declaring it to be of no value. But one stood by who said, 'You have misjudged the worth of the land.' He then explained the value of the different strata of soil and their uses. When we came to Avondale to examine the estate, I went with the brethren to the tract of land. After a time, we came to the place I had dreamed of, and there was the furrow that I had seen. The brethren looked at it in surprise. How had I come to be there? They asked. Then I told them of the dream that I had had. This picture, by the way, is one of the first buildings that was built on that property." "Well," they replied, "you can see that the soil is no good." "That," I answered, "was the testimony borne by the two men in the dream, and that was given as the reason why we should not occupy the land. But one stood upon the upturned furrow and said, 'False testimony has been borne concerning the soil. God can furnish a table in the wilderness.'" Manuscript Releases, Volume 15, page 50. And she continued in the letter to her husband in 1907, "The man of whom," she's looking back, "the man of whom we purchased our palm trees told me that he would be pleased to have me observe the way they were planted. I then asked him to let me show him how it had been represented in the night vision that we should be planting. I invited him to come to visit me when the fruits should be ripe. He said to me, 'You need no lesson from me to teach you how to plant trees.' Our crop was very successful. The peaches were the most beautiful in coloring and the most delicious in flavor of any that I had tasted. We grew the large yellow Crawford and other varieties, grapes, apricots, nectarines, and plums." The problem is Ellen White never did write down the instructions that she was given in the night season. There is no documentation of what the exact formula is for what we call the Ellen White method. But over 50 years ago, Lynn Hoag, pictured here as an adult, was 13 years old. Prior to this, he was raised in India and saw firsthand the necessity of growing food. This sparked a passion in him that continues to this day. After his family returned to the United States, Lynn took advantage of a life-changing opportunity. He took a hands-on garden class taught by Herbert Clarence White. This class was taught In this class he was taught the Ellen White method for planting trees by her own grandson. This method was given as a revelation in the night vision to Ellen White. I spoke with Lynn Hoag, by the way, about this, and he said that Herbert Clarence White had worked for Ellen White at Ilmshaven and planted many trees there over the years using Ellen White's method. So even though Ellen White didn't write down the formula of how to do this, her grandson was taught firsthand by Ellen White, and he then taught this class, which Lynn Hoag was a student when he was 13 years old. Lynn has taught this same method ever since, with some adaptations along the way. It also makes pine trees grow much faster. In this photo, you'll see Lynn with 2 trees. Both are planted on the same day. One on the left, the Ellen White method, and the other in the forestry method. The results speak for themselves.
We want to demonstrate a little bit of divine wisdom that God has given to His children at the end of time in these trees. And this is a tree that was planted what we call the Ellen White method. She was given this method in a dream, and I came across this method when I was 13 years old. And every place I've lived from then until now, if I've lived there a year or more, I've planted trees this way. They've all done wonderfully well. This tree is a little over 10 feet tall, and it's just about 3.5 years since we planted them. Now, all of these trees were just 6 inches or so little twigs. These are sequoias, giant sequoia trees. They were little twigs when we planted them. Those that are planted over here are planted the way the forestry department recommends that they be planted. And the tallest of these is this one over here. It's about 4.5 feet tall. So this is about a little over twice the height. But when we look at the size of the trunks and the amount of foliage, we have at least 20 to 1 in mass, the amount of growth. And the same thing will happen with fruit trees, with tomato vines, with grapevines, and other deep-rooted plants if you plant them the same way.
We will now learn about the science and the method behind the Ellen White method of planting trees.
Planting by the blueprint. This is the method of planting trees as taught by Ellen G. White and transmitted by her grandson, and today being taught by Lynn Hoag, who learned this method from Ellen White's grandson as a 13-year-old young man. So first of all, just the basic outline of what this looks like. This is from a YouTube video of the process. First you have your sapling, your tree, and kind of working down the layers from the top down. You have a mulch layer on top. Then you have your tree that has been planted atop a large rock to give it anchor as the roots grow and develop. You have a soil layer that has some amendments added to it and mixed into it. You have a pure topsoil layer. You have an air pocket that's in that first layer of pure topsoil. Then you have a rock layer and another layer of amended soil. And you'll see many illustrations where you have the air pocket at the bottom, and that is no longer advocated, rather having the air pocket above the rock layer, due to the fact that the microbes above the rock layer are going to be aerobic, utilizing oxygen, and those below the rock layer will be anaerobic, and the oxygen presence in that can at the bottom is actually counterproductive. So note that new positioning as per the discussion with Lynn Hoag about the current methods of doing the planting by the blueprint. This is a more detailed diagram of the Ellen White planting method, and it can be found at suncountrygardens.com. Again, this diagram actually doesn't include the boulder, the 20-pound rock. The 20-pound rock is an approximate size that will give the tree something to anchor to. We'll talk more about that later on. You can have a variety of different mulch layers on the surface depending on your application. They have a rock mulch or a leaf mulch. You can finish with a leaf mulch. If it's more decorative, a rock mulch is fine, but the rock mulch isn't essential. It's more of an aesthetic component. The leaf mold is an important component that you can use at the top. An inch of compost there as well to just add additional nutrients. A large tin can be used to prevent rodent damage to the sapling. Then you have your amended soil. First layer of amended soil as you're working down from the top has peat moss, leaf mold, topsoil, and a variety of minerals that we'll get into here in a little bit. Then you have a layer of topsoil, and then you have a 4-inch air tile, which could be just a piece of pipe, and a PVC or drain tile or a flower pot. Could be a variety of different things, just a place to trap some air. Then a layer of small rocks, and these can be anything from fist size to gravel. And then finally at the very bottom, another batch of the amended soil at the bottom of your hole. So you can buy pre-prepared kits of the minerals. So this is a box of the amendment that could then be put into the topsoil that is amended and put at the 2 different positions within the soil, rather than having to go and hunt for each of the different components in the amended soil. So it is again available from suncountrygardens.com if you wish to go that route. So one tree would be $68 worth of materials. So it's a pretty heavy box. It's about 10 pounds or more for the shipping of the materials. So depending on what the availability is of the various components that you need to put into the tree. So first of all, you're going to dig a large hole. So 3 by 3 by 3 is a good dimension to begin with. The size of the hole wasn't specifically delineated, but this is a good size to work with. So you're going to cut through the topsoil and separate the topsoil from the subsoil. So the topsoil is going to have the organic layer. It's going to be just below the grass, and it'll be more loamy. It'll have organic components in it. You can see the horizons in the lower picture with the topsoil versus the subsoil. The subsoil is going to be more mineral based and mineralized and not have the organic matter in it. So separate those two. You may want to kind of strip off the sod and not include that in the topsoil, but have that as a separate component that could be composted and used at a different time. So you want to separate those 2 types of soil, the topsoil and the subsoil. You can do that hole digging either with a spade and just do it with old grunt work, or I know a number of people who have hired or borrowed an excavator of different sizes. One used a full-on construction excavator that's used for huge construction jobs, another very large hole as a part of that. So actually the bigger the hole, almost the better, and that you can put a lot of good material in and around the new sapling to give it a good start. But however is most convenient for you. You can see that you can rent little excavators quite readily in most urban areas. So shovel or steam shovel. So secondly, you're going to be mixing your backfill dirt. Those are the layers. So you have 2 layers of amended soil. It's the same amended soil. So these are how you mix that. You'll be distributing it into 1-foot layers in your hole. So you'll need to mix an adequate amount to have 1 foot at the bottom and then 1 foot above the topsoil layer. So you take topsoil and you use peat moss or leaf mold, depending on what you have available. So leaf mold would just be like last season's fallen leaves from a deciduous tree that have been either collected and put in a bin of some kind, like a screen bin or a piece of fencing, to just let it kind of rot down. Or you could go just into a forest area and just pick up that top layer of duff, we call it, of the broken down through the course of a season leaves that have fallen from the tree last season. Then you'll use some finished compost, essentially manure, so cow manure, horse manure, whatever kind of manure you may have available. That'll be a good nitrogen source. So those 3 things in equal parts. Mix those together. By hand, you can do that with a shovel and just mix them around and get them good and even distribution through the pile of backfill dirt. Then you're going to add 10 pounds of soft rock phosphate. So that's a colloidal phosphate or a rock phosphate of some kind. So the phosphate actually enables the nutrients to be carried adequately to the roots and be taken up by the roots. So 10 pounds of soft rock phosphate, that will be distributed as 5 pounds in each of those backfill layers that we'll talk about. Then take 1 quart of seawater and sprinkle it on and mix that in. That provides micro nutrients from trace elements that are found in seawater. So seawater, actually, any seawater in the world that you can get will be fine. Try to get it from as pristine a source as possible, not a polluted source. And all oceans are in common, so the ratio of elements are the same, even from places like the Dead Sea or the Great Salt Lake. The ratio will be the same of the elements, but the concentration may be different. And actually that ends up being real close to the same constituent makeup of human blood. The micro element profile is very, very similar. So if you don't have access to seawater, fresh seawater, you can actually, if you're near the ocean, you can grab a bucket and take it home with you and keep it for an indefinite amount of time. It has no expiration date, so you can keep it for years and years and years and use it as needed. But not having regular seawater at your disposal, you can use a product called C90, referring to the 90 micronutrients and trace elements that are present in it. And that will also supply the same things that you would find in regular seawater. Then you can also add half a cup of kelp meal. That doesn't seem like very much, but it's enough. You can overdo kelp. It does have another way of adding those micronutrients to the soil, but you don't want to overdo it. So half a cup is going to be more than adequate for that amount of soil that you're mixing together to put back into the hole. Then you can add calcium, or should add calcium. So that comes in different forms. You can use that as gypsum if you have a clay, dry soil, or as dolomite lime in wet. And basically, it modifies the pH and allows it to become, the soil to become more sweet versus acidic. And that allows the electroconductivity of the soil to be improved. Enables the nutrients to be moved from one place to another more efficiently. Also, if you have really soggy soil, you can add azomite to it as a way to increase overall yield of the tree in the future, as well as enable it to have a better resistance to pests. Third, now you're going to start putting the soil back in. So we have a whole pile of soil that's been amended. You're going to take and fill the bottom third of the hole with the soil mix. So that's going to be your amended soil, about 1 foot in depth. Tamp that down. You can just walk around on it. You don't want to jump on it and make it hard and compact, but you want it to be firm to prevent excessive settling upon the completion of your hole, because the dirt will settle over time as you water it, despite what you do. So go ahead and tamp it down firmly, but not excessively. Step 4, you're going to put a layer of small fist to gravel sized rocks, completely covering that layer of amended soil that you just put in. So if you don't have the fist-sized rocks, it can just be rocks that came from your soil that you dug out. Just keep the rocks separate and put them back in. Or if it's all like sandy or just perfect soil, then you can snag some gravel, or any layer of rocks will really do fine with that. So that rock layer creates a bit of an electric field in between the layers of soil. Ian Jones did a lot of research in this regard, according to Lindhoeg, and basically it aids root growth. And it actually separates the layers of soil. So the layers essentially below the rock layer are going to be of a more anaerobic type, those that do not use oxygen. And then above that layer is where you're going to have the bacterial types that are aerobic and utilizing oxygen, hence the placement of the air chamber above the rock layer. So electroconductivity is actually a soil parameter that measures the pH, essentially the acidity or basicity of the soil, and indicates the availability of nutrients. If you have a low pH or a low electroconductivity, that means there aren't as many nutrients in the soil, and it will become more acidic. And those nutrients are washed out, hence the need to replace them or have adequate minerals present. Some plants, like blueberries for example, prefer an acidic soil, but most plants prefer one in the neutral range to have a higher conductivity. You don't want to have excessive pH or a high pH, because you'll have salination taking place and excessive amount of nutrients. Could be excess sodium salts, etc., that can actually inhibit plant growth. The 5th step is the addition of 2 4-inch drain tiles or plastic pieces of pipe. So in the lower right-hand corner, you can see an example along a foundation drain. That's drain tile. It's not tile, actually. It's just a plastic perforated pipe. Or you can just use a chunk of PVC that's 4 inches in diameter and block the ends with rocks so that it doesn't fill up. Moles and other worms and things will eventually fill those right up if you don't put something in the ends to just kind of block the cavity. Or you can just use a 1-gallon pot or other plaster or clay pot to create an air chamber at the bottom, actually above the rock layer, right on top of the rock layer in the hole. Next, you're going to add just pure topsoil. So it's an unamended layer of topsoil that you didn't mix during the amending process. So you can also add some cottonseed meal. This is a good source of nitrogen. You could also use alfalfa meal perhaps for that. Just one little bit, a couple handfuls. You don't want to overdo the nitrogen, because nitrogen, while good, can promote excessive rapid growth, which can lead to other issues like low fruiting and excessive growth that weakens the stems. So the cottonseed and the alfalfa meal can be purchased at a local feed store. Those are a couple different options of things that could be added. You don't need to buy them at a high dollar like nursery or something like that. You can just go to a feed store and get those. You do want to use organic alfalfa if possible and cottonseed meal, in that they will not have any herbicides or pesticides associated with them and be non-genetically modified. Step 7, you're going to add a rock to the center of the hole above that topsoil layer. So it's about a 20-pound rock, just give or take. So it's a pretty hefty rock. It anchors the tree, and also as it breaks down underground, it will provide minerals to the tree in addition to the other ones that are in the amended soil. If the tree has a large taproot, you can skip that. The boulder isn't an essential part of the whole program, but it does give the tree an adequate anchor as it grows and helps to maintain its uprightness. I've seen more than one apple tree, an aged apple tree, tipped over for various reasons, either splitting out or up by the roots. And if it has a good solid anchor, it'll have a better tendency to stay upright throughout its lifespan. So again, it's not indispensable, but it's a good thing to add to the program. If you're in an area where gophers are an issue, before you backfill and plant your tree, you can put in a gopher mesh. So there's different ways to do that. You want to make sure that it's at least 2 feet down because gophers can dig pretty deep. And you can do the cage at the bottom or no cage. But in any case, you want to make sure that it extends up adequately enough so that in the bottom you can see a sampling with a section of the mesh sticking up above the ground. That way, if the gophers are there, they're less likely to climb up out of the ground and over the top of that and burrow down again and cause problems with your tree because they risk exposure to predation. If your hardware cloth mesh containment area or exclusion device is underground, they'll just burrow over the top of it and get right in. You do want to make sure that that is wide enough so that the tree will not grow into that. You want to have it around the trunk far enough so that as a tree grows, it doesn't impede or grow into the trunk itself, because that can provide some other issues that may not be beneficial down the road. So if gophers are an issue, a gopher cage can be a helpful device to maintain the integrity of your tree. Next, cover the rock with topsoil and then place the tree spreading the roots over the rock, and make sure that it's nice and upright. And you want to backfill that soil, the amended soil, around the rock and over the roots. So make sure it's the amended soil. And as you fill that top third of the hole over the roots and over the rock, make sure you firm it down. But you want to make sure that you don't cover any graft lines. Make sure the trunk is up to about the level of where it was pulled out of the ground originally when the nursery removed it. You can see the soil line where that was done, but you don't want to cover the graft line because that can create other issues down the road. You can see on these trees where the graft lines are. On the left tree, it's a very well-established tree, very different trunks. The one on the right, you can see the mark line where there was a wedge of trunk growth to where the scion, they call it, was added and grafted to the lower portion. So just make sure that you don't cover the graft with your topsoil as you're planting your tree. Step 11, add worms from compost if you have them available, because they will actually be very rich in the soil, mining through it, creating water pockets and air pockets, and they can go down several feet. And just add their worm castings to the soil as you add compost to the top. They will drag it down, leaves and things like that, throughout the seasons. So you can use it for manure or food compost, or if you don't have those available, just go to a bait shop and get some. Red wigglers will be in one level towards the surface. The night crawlers will be deeper. You can add them both, or even just one set if that's all you have. But worms can be a great benefit to a freshly planted tree. So step 12, you're going to add a 1 to 2 inch layer of compost or leaf mold as a final top dressing. So there's the leaf bins that are breaking down as they are being stored outside, and that's the leaf mold that you can use in your mixing as well as in your top dressing. You could use grass compost clippings too. You don't want to get those composting top dressing too thick if you're doing surface watering on a regular basis for your trees, because they can actually prevent the water from soaking to the root zone. The water can just shed off and run off of them. So while they will help retain moisture that is watered and retain soil moisture that is already present, it can cause a runoff event to occur as well. So don't overdo the mulch as you're establishing your trees. You want to do a rodent collar around your trunk. The first year that we planted trees, over the winter, we had mice come and chew some of the trunk areas off of our freshly planted trees, which is rather disappointing. We didn't have a rodent collar around it, and that can be done in a variety of different ways. So on the far right, you have an expandable version that as a tree grows, it can expand around it without growing into it. You can also use wire mesh again. That you want to make sure that you have adequate space for the tree to grow, because it can sometimes send out suckers. It'll grow through that, or the trunk can enlarge in around it and begin to grow into it. So just pay attention to that. And there's a variety of different plastic versions of that as well, just to protect it from rodents chewing on it. So this whole method, planting by the blueprint, will accelerate the growth of your tree as seen earlier in the presentation of the 2 trees planted by the forestry method that Lynn Hoag did, and actually increase the fruit-bearing capacity of the trees that are planted by this method. And there is a DVD available of this process. You can find it at plumprepared.com in their DVD and book section. And I think there is an amended sheet that's added to that clarifies the position of the air pocket as compared to what the video states. And also suncountrygardens.com, which is owned and operated by Lynn Hoag, and that can be purchased there. Or you can also get just the plain video from archive.org at the website below, and it is available there in its entirety, although it doesn't have the updates of the various things that have been added or amended in the process since the video was first made. So thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll have great success as you plant by the blueprint.
We're going to wrap up our presentation today by taking a look at some efforts that have been made by applying the Ellen White method to other things than fruit trees. And that is, in this case, tomatoes. You'll remember that Lynn Hoag had commented that you can use the Ellen White method successfully in tomato plants and grapevines. I found a website of a group of people who had experimented with applying the Ellen White planting method to tomatoes. It's called the Tomato Project at tomatoproject.net. Explained, one of Lynn Hoag's findings is that this method works great with tomatoes. Most commercial tomato production achieves a yield of 15 to 35 tons per acre. This works out to be about 5 to 12 pounds of harvestable tomatoes per plant. Long-season tomato plants in greenhouses can double this yield to 10 to 15 pounds per plant. Tomatoes grown with the tree planting method consistently yield 100 pounds per plant for large-sized varieties. That's huge. That's like 8 times the volume. So you know now that you could do this method for tomatoes, and according to Lynn Hoag, grapes as well. I'd like to also provide with you a variety of online resources regarding the Ellen White planting method. Now, as you watch this video, obviously the links don't work, but if you press pause, you could type in or write down the address for the website. The first one is the Tomato Project that I just told you about, and its web address is the tomatoproject.net. The next one is an online video of Len Hoag showing how to plant the Ellen White method. And it's on YouTube, and you can either write this web address or you could just search the Ellen White method and find it that way. It's called Planting by the Blueprint. Planting by the Blueprint can also be purchased in CD form from Len Hoag's website, suncountrygardens.com. He also has some resources there that are useful, including this chart. Len Hoag's class, he had a series of classes at the Adventist Agriculture Association convention in the Portland, Oregon area in the year 2019. You can listen to all of his classes in audioverse.org. Just go there and search for Len Hoag. You can see there's a session about planting by the blueprint, and then he has a 6-part series about home gardening, and then he also goes into some of the biological things, trace minerals, and so forth. Here's another online how-to video of an individual who their pen name is Jam Packed Family, and this family, along with their kids, demonstrate how to plant that tree using the Ellen White method. Here's another one. This one's a little more serious. This is a step-by-step demonstration from a website, End Time Country Living, and it's a YouTube video. So you could search for the Ellen White method, and then End Time Country Living is the video. There's another one, Country Living Experience. This is a Adventist country living website, and they give a step-by-step demonstration as well on a YouTube video, Country Living Experience. The final thing I'm going to do is play for you an audio recording of a short phone conversation that I had with Len Hoag regarding his explanation about the use of seawater on your plants.
I use the ocean water minerals in the spring. I use it on the fruit trees every year. This year has been the worst year ever for peach leaf curl. Peach leaf curl is an uncontrolled growth of cells. It is caused by a virus, and so we'll spray the trees with a solution of water and ocean minerals, and we'll also put some on the ground. I put about an ounce per fruit tree on the ground, and so that the roots will take it up. What will happen is that the diseased leaves will die, turn black, and fall off the tree. If we have a leaf that is half diseased and half healthy, what will happen is that the diseased part will die and the healthier part will simply get healthier there. And then the side benefit to that is when we have all of those minerals in the ground and the tree is taking it up, those minerals are going into the fruit while they're being formed. When we do that, your fruit will taste incredibly better, whether it's peaches, nectarines, cherries, whatever. They'll just taste very, very much sweeter and better. So try it and compare your fruit then with the best that you can buy in the grocery store, and you'll be pretty pleased with the result.
Now, in our case, we got quart or gallon milk containers with actual ocean water. So would you translate that to what you recommend we do here? Because it sounded like you had purchased some sea salt or something like that. Can you explain how, if you actually had ocean water, how much would you do and where would you do it?
Okay, first make sure the ocean water came from a clean part of the ocean. Don't go to something like San Francisco Bay or whatever, it'll be polluted there. Assuming that it's clean ocean water, use about a quart per tree, and you can just pour that out around the base of the tree if you're going to water it in. If you feel the need to, then take that quart, add 10 quarts of fresh water with it, and put that around the tree. That way it won't be too strong for anything, and the tree will take it up, and you'll get the same results. If you're spraying the leaves with the ocean water, then take that quart of water. If we've got a diseased tree, take that quart of water, dilute it with 5 quarts of fresh water, and use that mixture to spray the tree. If we have a sick tree, we need to be more aggressive with it. That's why I'm doubling the strength.
But if you don't have a diseased tree at this point, you just put it on the ground, or do you still want to spray the leaves?
You don't need to spray the leaves. You could do either or both, but with a healthy tree, take the ocean water, add 10 quarts of fresh water, put that around the tree. That would be the best way to put it on.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to close with a Bible verse, Genesis 1:29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to whom it shall be meat."